Thank you. If you'd just like to take a seat, if you haven't there, and we'll make a start. Thank you very much. Anyone standing around the outside, there are plenty of seats around. So Megan in the middle here will just give you a wee wave and she can direct you to where some seats are. If you've got some seats near you, just put your hand up right at the moment. Some empty seats around. So, right, feel free to make your way over to those places. That'll be fantastic. Okay. Well, good morning. I want to thank you for joining us this morning as we come here to celebrate Tony's life and to farewell and remember an amazing man whose life impacted so many people. For those of you who don't know me, my name's John O'Martin. I'm the pastor here at this church, the church that Tony attended with his family over many years. And I also had the privilege of counting Tony as a very close friend as well. I'll be leading some aspects of the gathering this morning and also have the privilege of sharing some aspects of this morning with Pastor Don Barry from Gateway Church in Hamilton, who also was a very dear friend of Tony as well, and in whose church Tony ministered many times over the years too. Just in the way of a few notices to get them out of the way, a special welcome to those joining us on the live stream from overseas and from around this nation. And we just want to welcome you as you join us today. And just to point out, we are streaming on YouTube, so YouTube has some pretty rigid rules. So during the song or some photo tributes, you may just have silence in the background, but the rest of us will be able to enjoy the live here. So if you need to use your bathrooms, just out the back there and off to your left, the bathrooms are there. And in the case of an emergency, please make your way out to the car park off to your right out the back. And for most of you, as you came in, you probably signed the register of attendance, but if you didn't, the family would dearly love for you just to be able to note that you were here and even write a special thought or memory there as well. And then following our gathering this morning, we'd love to invite you through to the cafe just for a very special time of sharing together and some refreshments there and a time to catch up and just show our love and support to the family at this time as well. Well, in the early hours of this past Wednesday morning, the 12th of October, 2022, Anthony Lawrence John Saxon, known to most of us as Tony, passed from this life and stepped through the curtain of death into an eternity with his Lord Jesus Christ. He was 61 years old. We're here today to celebrate his life, his faith in Jesus, his love for his family and his friends, and the impact that he had on so many people around him. And we're also here to remember someone who is very dear to so many and who will always hold a very special place in each one of our hearts. We're also here to recognize the loss of a very cherished and loved husband, father, father-in-law, brother, brother-in-law, uncle and friend. And we're here to comfort and encourage one another with our memories and with our love. Most of you are here because you knew Tony or you know one's very close to him. And I just want to point out in a gathering like this from time to time, Tony would be a little bit cheeky if he was sitting there where you are. There was a little slide, an irreverent side on occasion. Even quite often I'll be preaching from the front and my phone would go beep, beep, and there'd be a cheeky message coming through as I'm trying to maintain my focus and he's taking the mickey about something or someone. And so I just really just want to give you that freedom. Today's your day to remember Tony. And if you need to whisper to someone a little thought or memory, that's absolutely fine. If you find yourself with tears or you find yourself laughing, that's absolutely fine as well. And this is just our time to be together and just to take a moment, informally in many ways, as well as formally, and just to really celebrate this man that loved so many here and that so many here loved in return. Tony was born in 1960 in Greymouth on the West Coast. Any West Coasters in the house today? Oh, a few proud West Coasters. We had a very special family ceremony on Tuesday where we buried Tony and the heavens opened. And many people commented on West Coast weather and the heavens are crying and that sort of thing. Many soaked to the skin, but in many ways it was very fitting for a man who spent so many years on the coast as well. Born to Jack and Daphne Saxon, he was the seventh of 9 children, and many of those children are represented here today and their children. When Tony was young, for a season, his family relocated to Motueka, where his parents owned a dairy for a season. And Tony, as a young child, like many of the other children that had access at the time as well, used to enjoy sneaking into the dairy on occasion and feasting on the lollies that were under the counter there with no lid on top. They then moved as a family back to Cobden, Greymouth, and Tony attended Sacred Heart Primary School. He went on from there to Marist boys in his high school years. When he left school, Tony became a fisherman, primarily in the Greymouth and Jackson Bay areas. At 18 years old, on one of his trips back from Jackson Bay, he was involved in a major car accident where the truck that he was driving had its brakes fail on a dangerous hill. The resulting crash caused serious injuries both to Tony's face and his ankle, amongst other areas. Injuries that would affect him for the rest of his life. This accident took him out of fishing, and he needed to take about a year or so to be rehabilitated back to the stage where he could get on with life. It was this crash that in these later years saw Tony have operations on his ankle to fuse it, and many of you would have been aware of that journey for Tony, and also saw him have a lot of dental work on his face as well, with his good friend Ross Pello focusing on placing tooth implants into his jaw and rebuilding the teeth that had been so damaged in the crash. Tony's next adventure, and Tony had many adventures in his life. As you hear this man's story, you sort of go, wow, he experienced so many things and was involved in so many different ways and different things. So I will share some of these with you this morning. But his next adventure was training as a psych nurse in Hokitika. It was during this season that he became a Christian at age 19 years old. He was part of the Good News 80s Church Fellowship and was initially involved with Cobden Anglican Church and then Runanga Christian Fellowship. He had an opportunity to then complete a bridging nursing course to general nursing at Grey Base Hospital, where he met Christine at around 20 or 21 years old. They married in 1984, and they settled in a rundown cottage which they've renovated together, and I believe you may see a picture of that on a photo tribute soon. They renovated it together and also with the help of their local church family as well. Tony excelled in his nursing studies, and he loved working alongside the doctors and the coronary care unit. Chrissy and Tony welcomed Jude in 1988 and David in early 1991. In those days, Tony really enjoyed being part of the vibrant Runanga Church Fellowship family. In these early years, he also worked in a series of other jobs, the Campbell Hardware Store, caretaker of the local school, and even supervising a group of guys with disabilities as they fulfilled roles in Shantytown. Then Tony had another change of career, and he began working in both youth justice and restorative justice. He did really well at this and was seconded to the head office in Wellington in late 1991. As a family, they then moved to Hamilton in 1992, where Tony had a permanent job with youth justice, but they soon realized it wasn't the right job, and they moved back to Wellington, where they lived for the next 7 years. And in this time, he did both youth justice and Christian ministry. Lydia was born to Tony and Chrissy in 1996. In 1998, Tony and Chrissy moved to Nelson to pastor the Nelson New Life Church. Under Tony's leadership and unique giftings, this church fellowship grew very rapidly. Eventually, they changed the name from Nelson New Life Church to City Church. It's now called Aspire. And they took on the big venture of selling the old premises that were there and buying a new property where the Aspire Church family still meet today. Alistair Simmons, the pastor of Aspire Church presently, formerly City Church, formerly Nelson New Life, wrote me a wee email. And he said this, he said, look, around 20 years ago, I remember the first day I attended a service at City Church. Tony pointed at my wife Tanya and I through the crowd of 120 at least in attendance, and he prophesied into our future with words of knowledge about matters that had occurred for us in the previous year, regarding things that he could have known nothing about unless God had revealed it to him. This spoke to both of us so powerfully and caused us both to stay and grow significantly under Tony's leadership. He goes on to say, I personally believe that Tony's ministry has left a strong prophetic legacy that remains to this day at Aspire Church, and that Tony's ministry was the catalyst that inspired me to seek growth in the prophetic arena. He says, over the years, I've had the privilege to be able to prophesy along Tony at various church gatherings where I was always amazed at the accuracy and the words of encouragement that he gave and in his ministry to others. And he goes on to say, thank you, Tony, for all that you gave to us. And he says to the family, please know that Tanya and I and the Aspire Church family continue to hold you in our prayers in this time and the days to come. Tony had another car accident in 2004. And went through quite a difficult time after that for the next number of years. This affected him a lot, but he was always determined to make the best of life for he and for his family. He stepped out and turned another passion of his into a business, and you see some items up the front here that represent some aspects of this. And he created his own hunting and fishing guiding business. He was very good at this. Clients came from all around the nations to be a part of it. He loved his time with them in the isolation of the South Island backcountry, and he introduced many a person to hunting and fishing experiences. His own backyard was not immune to these experiences either, or these adventures. And I remember the day that Crispy the pig arrived home, a baby little wild piglet that then grew in the backyard and stoked there for quite a while, greatly enjoyed by the kids at the time, until finally Crispy grew so big he had to be rehomed to another place. I don't believe it was to the freezer this time around, but it would make a good story. The kids, we could never tell the kids that though. And after Tony's health recovered, he held other roles with SIFs and with Open Home Foundation, and for a period of time, he was even the interim CEO of the Foster Care Federation. He was most excited when he was finally able to go back into full-time Christian ministry, traveling extensively around this nation and into many other nations like India, Chile, Cambodia, Singapore, Nepal, and Australia. Tony lived such a broad life. He loved his photography, and he is so good at it. And we see photos up the front just representing just a very few of the photographs that Tony's taken over the years. He loved his coffee. Any other coffee fans out there? You'll understand some of these terms, but he had a E61 rocket that he loved. Anyone going, oh, yeah? And he also loved his double dopios, his 4 to 6 shots in one coffee cup. It's just like, oh boy. Maybe that explains a little bit of the aspect of Tony's life at times. And you couldn't hold that man back, especially after a coffee. He loved cooking, and he was a very good cook, and many a time over the years he's cooked up a meal for Ness and I, or whipped something up, and you've just got to try this, I'll make this dish for you, it's going to be amazing, and he'd go and buy all these ingredients, and in the latter years, Tony stayed with us for a period of time while he was recovering at one stage, and during that time he insisted on cooking some very special meals for us as a family, with mushrooms and prawns and all sorts of different goodies in there that we'd never really experienced like that before. He loved fine dining, and he knew his wines really well. He loved people. He enjoyed picking up hitchhikers and would invite them over for meals, and was extremely generous to strangers that he met all over the place. Friendly, welcoming, empathetic, and so encouraging in their life. And many a time he'd meet someone, and I'd get a phone call, John, I've met this person, you've got to meet them. It's going to be so good, they're just so amazing at this, and you've got to meet them, and we could so help them like this. And he'd be so excited and passionate about this person whose life he could help sow into, or we could encourage, or they could encourage us. And so it was very much a part of his life, as he just celebrated maybe even many different ones in this room that he'd met on different occasions, and as he sought to bring us into relationship with one another. He loved being out on a boat. He loved going fishing. He loved his music. He enjoyed his travel, and he loved the experiences with different cultures. And some of these photos even represent this today, as well as on his Facebook page if you've looked through in recent times. He loved learning the Maori language and culture. He loved seafood. So many things that Tony loved. And if we opened up for a sharing time, so many of you go, yep, and this and this and this. He was a man passionate for so many aspects of life, and so many aspects of connection with other people. Tony had such a sharp mind. He had a memory for detail even many years on, and he was a master storyteller. As I said before, he's had such varied experiences in life and work and ministry, and as such, I never ever tired of hearing the stories that he'd share from his life, or from his family's journey, or the adventures that he'd had over the years as he encountered many different people around. I had the privilege of counting Tony as a very close friend, and we bonded very naturally around both our love for hunting and our passion for Jesus Christ and church ministry. And we went on to shoot many, many, many deer together over the years. In fact, I think in Tony, I probably found someone who was even more passionate about hunting than myself. And it would be nothing for the two of us to hunt till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then get up at 5:30 again that same morning and carry on hunting, and just be so excited about what was happening and what was going on for us there. On one of our bigger missions together that we fitted in a couple of times, it was quite normal to drive right through the night down to Haast. No sleep at all, just many cokes and coffees on Tony's behalf, and lots of chats along the way. We'd catch a chopper at 6 o'clock in the morning into one of our hunting blocks, and then we'd begin hunting almost as soon as we landed, once we'd set up a bit of a base camp. We'd then often on that day walk 20 kilometres easily in the bush and the river edges, and rough and beautiful terrain, and just in that hunger to get out and to enjoy our time together, and also to seek to harvest a number of red deer during that time as well. Very normal over a few days like that to rack up well over 100 k's walking and hunting together, and we'd harvest many animals that would then bring back out and back to our families. Nothing was ever wasted. And I've got many a memory of cutting up deer in my garage, and I'd often be a bit on a time constraint. My kids were a little bit younger than Tony's kids at that stage, and I'd sort of be thinking, I better get back in, this will be wondering what I'm doing, and young kids and trying to sort them out in bits and pieces. And Tony's like, come on, let's just stop for a fry-up. Come on, because we've got these eye steaks. And before we knew it, the cooker would be out, and I'd be like, oh, Tony, I'm just going to keep chopping here at the moment. And he's like, oh, come on, just stop. And he'd have the pan going, the oil bubbling. Little bits of eye steak would be thrown in the pan just for a few seconds on each side, and then he'd be like, you got to taste this. You got to try this. And he was just so passionate about those aspects. He was a very good hunter and loved being out in the outdoors. Very good at bushcraft. And he loved teaching his children these skills in their formative years. Camping, tramping, taking his family fishing and hunting were memories that he often referred to. I hold something in my hand here, and Lydia will recognize this. It's called a Lydia star. It's a little thumbtack with a reflector on it. And South Westland is never the same, Lydia. Wherever Tony went, Tony carried a little container of these in his bag, and these hold like a reflector of a reflector cone. And whenever he was in thick bush, or whenever he was making his way through to a hidden clearing, and he knew he'd be coming back in the dark, he'd mark his track with these Lydia stars every 50 metres or so, often both sides of the track, so it would work for him in the future. And then when it came dark and you could be confused completely about which direction to go, and a headlamp would be on and a Lydia star would just light up 50 metres away on a tree through the bush, and you'd walk to that, and then another one would light up. And as we wandered through, these Lydia stars guided us back to camp. And he talked with such fondness, Lydia, of you and he making these together, and just of the memory that it was for him, even as he was in the bush, of you and the other kids. And I could take you to South Westland now and show you many a trail that's marked with these. And then when it becomes dark and a little bit scary, a little bit unsure for some people, these light the way back to camp and back to where we're supposed to be. So some very special memories there. I've got this one here for you. Tony had a confidence that carried him through many a situation. And as I say that, I'm sure many of you can relate to what I'm saying. It probably opened doors for him that others may never have had opened. And we loved that about him. And I remember early one morning, he told me about bush stalking in the middle of nowhere. And he said this poodle, this full-size poodle, all shaved and done up, came stalking through the bush. And he's standing there watching this thing going, what is that doing there? And he said then a hunter came through all dressed in camo and equally stealthily followed this poodle through. Tony got talking to him, and the guy explained what an amazing deer dog this poodle was. So Tony came home. Now, I've got a couple of Hungarian Vizslas that I hunt there over, but Tony came back and he's like, mate, I'm so pumped, I'm getting a poodle. And he goes, look, I'm definitely going to get a poodle. When it's the right time of my life, I'm getting a poodle. And he goes, I'm going to be so good at training that thing. Not only will it lead me onto deer very, very effectively, but I'm going to train it to poo in a bag. I'm like, Tony. He goes, no, seriously. Like, there's going to be no mess on my lawn. I'll train it to poo in a bag. I'll be able to do that. You know, such was his confidence. I think as I look out around this room now, I know there's a few keen hunters out there and a few buddies of Tony's, and I wonder whether, now that Tony's not able to do that himself, whether one of you should take on that challenge, and we'd all be intrigued to see how you got on. So we really miss this amazing, beautiful man who loved so many people and loved the outdoors and loved his God. And as I talked about, we enjoyed many adventures in the outdoors and in church life together with Tony. Tony had a very unique prophetic or word of knowledge gift. God would show him pictures of a person's life or circumstance, and just these pictures would just flash into his mind, and he'd just share these pictures with these people who often had never met before, and they would just be aghast, amazed. You could never know that unless someone had told you. You could never know that unless God had told you that. And often God would use that picture that God had given Tony to then open a door to remind that person of God's love for them and to greatly encourage them. Tony was such a unique man who, when he was well, showed great wisdom and such depth of insight that blessed so many people. And I consistently have people approach me, and I have for a very long time now, and again even today, who say, Tony spoke into my life and it shifted something from that time forth, changed the direction of my life, changed the things I hungered after, gave me a love for Jesus Christ. And it came because a man called Tony Saxon was willing to be used. A man like you and me with ups and downs, with challenges and good things, but in the midst of that, God used him amazingly to bless and encourage so many others. As I look around this room here, so many of us here today are in relationship because of Tony. And I think of many special friendships that I've formed over the years. It's because Tony said, "You've got to meet my friend. You've got to meet this guy or this woman. Or you've got to meet this person." And over time, I was able to form friendships with these beautiful people that Tony counted as very dear friends as well. Life wasn't always easy for Tony, as many, many people here know. In these latter years, you and I have had the privilege of walking with, I and many others have had the privilege of walking with Tony in both good times and difficult times. I learnt so much through him. I, like so many others, have been so hugely blessed by having Tony in my life. We will miss him greatly, and we're comforted hugely by the fact that because of Jesus Christ, this is not the end. We've got a special photo tribute now that Jude and David and the family have compiled together. And so let's just take a moment and just really celebrate and get a wee taste of Tony's life throughout the years. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. It's my absolute honour to be part of this memorial service for Tony. I'm going to invite Chrissy to come, and she's going to read from the scriptures. Chrissy, I have to just say to you, before I met you, I knew Tony quite well by that stage, and I knew something of his personality, and I said to him a number of times, I don't know who you're married to, but she's right up there as far as I'm concerned with Mother Teresa. Having met you, I still feel the same way. Would you come?
Thank you. I'm going to read Psalm 139, verses 1 to 18, and I've chosen this one for Tony because I know that he will now hear these words for himself, that he'll now have complete assurance in God's unconditional love for him. It says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for the darkness is as light to you. For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you."
We're going to have a series of personal tributes now, and I'm going to invite a number of people to come up and to speak to you. The first one is Mike Hurd, and it's going to be done by video. Mike is a hunting and a long-time friend of Tony. Secondly, David Eaton is going to come, again a close friend who was in City Church with Tony. Thirdly, we have Ross Simmons. Ross served on Tony's trust board. After that, I'll come back up and introduce our next series of tributes.
Hi everyone. Look, it's Mike Hurd speaking, along with my wife Del Hurd. We live in the Hawke's Bay. Unfortunately, today we're unable to be in Nelson to celebrate with you this funeral of Tony Saxon. And I say celebrate because that's what it needs to be. I mean, there's been incredible thoughts and emotions that have been running around in our heads over the last few days as we've all come to terms with what has happened. But you know what? I am so pleased to be here speaking to you today, and what a privilege it is to have known Tony Saxon for just on 27 years actually. Certainly been a long time, and I'm privileged to call him my friend because he really was. And it's tragic when you lose a friend, it really is. It's tough going for you all, and I want to acknowledge the Saxon family right now and all that you've been through and going through right now. It's tough times. But I want to celebrate today with you, and it's a tribute to Tony. He called himself Tony Saxon among the people, and he really was. When he was a well man, he was an amazing man, wasn't he just? And I had the privilege of working with him in church life and ministering up here in the Hawke's Bay for many, many years. And the prophetic gift that that man carried, as a lot of you will know, was just incredible. Lives were impacted, lives were touched, lives were changed forever, for eternity. And heaven will know just how many lives were impacted by the ministry of Tony Saxon. He was very humble in what he did and amazing in what he did. And we had a lot of fun together while we were doing the ministry together here in the Hawke's Bay. And he's impacted around the globe. We all know that. Incredible. But also another part of the life and friendship I had with Tony was evolved around hunting. We did a lot of hunting together around New Zealand, enjoyed each other's company on numerous trips. He was a great companion and such a funny guy. When he was a well man, he was one of the funniest men I knew. And the laughs that we got up to and the funny things we did were just incredible. And I will treasure those memories forever. And he was a great hunter, great bushman, and pretty good cook too, by the way. He knew how to cook. He was amazing at it. It was a bit of a disaster. There was stuff everywhere, but it was pretty awesome food that came out at the other end. But I was reminded of one story by a friend of mine the other day when Tony used to get these little things going on, and one of the things was around camouflage clothing when you were in the bush. And so he made this comment to me when he was all camoed up and looking odd. He said, "You know, Mike, you might look like a dick, but the deer think you're a stick." And you know what? He was quite right. Quite often we were able to get onto some animals as a result of that. But look, all jokes aside, what a wonderful guy. It's been tough, and it really is still tough for us as we come to terms with this. But you know, God ordains our days, and we just don't know, do we? And I just want to encourage you to grab every moment you have and enjoy it, and enjoy the memories, and share the memories of Tony, because there's plenty of them. While we're in the bush, on our mountain radio, there was a call sign, which was IB3070. And we got on there a lot, obviously, when we were calling up in the evenings. But today it's IB3070. Over and out, Tony Saxon, our friend, our dad, our companion in life. I wish you well. I thank you for being able to share with you today. And I want to encourage you to celebrate this life of Tony Saxon. Thank you very much. God bless.
Hi, I'm David Eaton. I met Tony in one of those very Tony moments. I was ready to go for a run in an office building in Wellington, and this guy is just coming in from a run. And Tony told me that God had told him that he was to meet a friend. And that's how we met. So it was, we ran around Wellington for hours, up Marta Vale, up to the top, and that wonderful celebration of relative youth, relative fitness, and relative strength that we look back on now and think, oh, if only. But I always saw Tony first as a man and as a friend. I didn't see Tony through the lens of his gift. And there's at times I think that the gift got in the way of who Tony was. But he had such a significant impact on my life and my wife. We did some time together in a church in Wellington, and we turned up in a little room through in the old New Life Church in the city, and there's a small group of the faithful there. There'd been a few years where there hadn't been a pastor, and there was a small group of people that were there just believing. And Tony felt that this was his ministry, and he dragged me along, and we spoke to that group of people, and God had given, the funny thing, God had given us both half of a prophetic word for that group. And it only came together in that forum, in that little group, that I shared some stuff and then Tony shared some stuff. But it was the start of a journey for Tracy and myself. We got married We got married in Wellington. Tony was my best man. And because I was pretty stupid, I'd organised my stag night the night before my wedding. And my groomsman was a very old buddy of mine who's no longer with us, but he was also a bit of a larrikin. And so he had some designs for my stag night. Now, Tony hadn't been a best man. I'm not sure he was best man subsequent either, but he was my best man. He took it very seriously because he loved me. And so he made sure at 2 o'clock in the morning of my wedding day that I found my way home, and that the last set of drinks that my larrikin buddies had put in front of me was returned to the bar. Now, I was an hour and a half late to my wedding, but I don't blame Tony for that. It was my fault. But it was a wonderful day, and Tony said some things as his best man that I'll always remember. And after that, we travelled. Tony said, I'm going to Nelson to be a pastor of this church. Do you want to come along with us? And so Tracy and I, we've been married a year, said, okay, let's do that. And so we had a lovely, wonderful 2-3 years here, living in this beautiful place, in this church, and we saw God move in the church in a way that just took our breath away. If you read Genesis, and you read the story of the garden, and there's so much in that story, layers and layers of meaning, that it's not about the words, it's about the narrative, it's about what's said there. It's just a wonderful, wonderful passage. But one of the things that's interesting is that the garden is a well-ordered place. It's where everything is laid out, where everything's perfect, where there is a boundary, where bad stuff is kept away. And there's an angel with a sword to keep them away. But inside the garden, inside this perfect place, is a snake. And it's the snake that we have in our lives. We can be in the best place, but there's this thing that is there, and if we listen to it and we follow it, then trouble comes. And with Tony, that was there. We know that. And for those of us friends, we travelled with him in those times, some more than others. Some of us turned away, we had to. But I want to pay tribute to the family, because you carried it more than any of us knew. And I want to say apologies too, because we should have known more, but we didn't. But, Tony had such a powerful ministry, he had such a charisma, such a wonderful way with people, that sometimes it was kind of hard to filter that through. But we loved him and he loved us. And I know that he loved you. When I was here, we had our firstborn, and so I was, new dad. No idea, no clue. But Tony was a little bit further down the track. So most Sundays, after all the business Sundays, Tony and I would just spend some time together and check in how things were going, keep each other a little bit to account. And I talked about being a dad. I wanted to get tips. And one of the things Tony reminded me, he says, you don't want to be a dad. You want to be a father. And he loved you kids. He talked a lot about you. He talked about how he wanted to be a father. And he struggled with it because of his upbringing and the poverty of his upbringing. I mean, poverty in a broader sense. And I want to say, when I look at you kids, that it stopped with Tony. It stopped with Tony. And we believe, as Christians, if some of us are Christians, we believe that when Tony died, he went to be with the Lord. His body stays here. His body is in the ground, broken, wounded. It's in the ground. But he's with the Lord. And when Jesus comes back again, his body will come back again. But it won't be broken. It won't be wounded. It'll be renewed. And they'll be put together. So, Tony, my friend, my brother, I will see you again. But not yet. Not yet. Thank you.
I have to say, I'm surprised you're still married after being an hour and a half late to your wedding, mate.
Very good, David. My name's Ross Simmons. Our lives first converged with the Saxons in 1999, at the same time on Nelson New Life Church. Tony was my friend. Friendships, as you have heard from David and others, it was a concept that was very important to him. It came out in many different ways. One of his favourite songs back in those early days of New Life Church and City Church was by a group called Delirious, What a Friend I've Found, a song about Jesus. He sometimes referred to Proverbs 18:24 from the Bible, which said, "There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." Yeah, friendships were important to him. We had a lot of fun together. Cycling trips, mountain biking, fishing, catching up over coffee. It was a lot of coffee. Tony had an amazing gift of friendship, of supporting you through difficult times and supporting you with the celebrations of things which were really great. We had a lot of hard times together too. And relationships can often be hard. Tested by various challenges and frictions, and tested to the point of breaking and beyond. In the last few years, our friendship boiled down pretty much to just long phone calls. We talked about many different things over those phone calls that would go on for ages, and there was reminiscing about past fun times together, talk of the future, talk of technology, talk of world events, much, much more. A lot of time talking, and increasingly a lot of time on my part listening. Last year, 2020, we had one of our frequent testing moments. Almost in desperation on this particular phone call, I'm remembering that verse that he often quoted, and I asked him, "Tony, what can I do for you to be a friend who is closer than a brother?" He thanked me for asking, but he didn't answer the question then, and nor did he answer it later. But he did at times, subsequent to that, refer to the fact that I'd asked him. And it was like it was enough just to do that. Expressing an appreciation for just having asked. In these phone conversations that we had, he would frequently touch on his regrets and failures, deep regrets, deep shame, deep disappointments. You see, just to digress for a moment, good people go to hell. Bad people go to heaven. And yes, the opposite is also true. But you see, heaven was never designed for the good and hell was never designed for the bad. Heaven was designed for the penitent and hell for the impenitent. Luke 18:10-14, Jesus is talking. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like the other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, and even as this tax collector, I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And Jesus continues, and the tax collector standing afar off would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. Tony was many things to many people, but he was indeed a man of penitence. And in this we can rejoice. Tony was my friend. My wife Andrea couldn't be here today. But she has this to share, and I'll read it verbatim. I have had a picture in my mind since we got the news on Wednesday morning. It is the back view of Tony and Jesus sitting together on a park bench. The Lord has his arm around Tony, and together they are discussing everything. Jesus has been wiping away Tony's tears and pouring healing balm into his soul, healing the wounds. Together, they are making sense of it all. And then they are laughing together. The torment and agony is all over.
I'm going to invite Tarina and Mary to come now, Tony's siblings.
Is this what it was like for Tones? It's quite good, really, isn't it? Good view. Anyway, sorry. For me, it's always been tones and trends in our relationship. We were both siblings, as you know, but we were really close friends. In fact, Tony invented my name, Trends, for me many, many years ago, and it's stuck. Tones is my big brother, and coming from a family of 9, me being the baby, and this one next, and him the youngest son of Saxon boys. He was the one brother that I was closest to growing up. Growing up on the west coast of the South Island in Cobden, Greymouth, I think it's pretty fair to say we were largely free-range kids with no limits and free to roam. Last week I lost my brother. And a really close dear friend. I know he will always have a place in my heart and in my thoughts day in and day out. There's nothing can separate that, even this. Yet we're always not that close. growing up, Tones was extremely passionate about a few things. He loved boxing, which he was very good at, by the way, and I knew this from personal experience. Possum trapping, which I'm pretty sure may have ignited his passion for the awe of the New Zealand native bush. I was his kid sister, willing and offering to be that punching bag. Mum would often say, he'd say, come on, Trina, let's go down the back and have a few. I never punched, I just we had to put our hands up. We were the punching bags, and Mum would say, you come back crying. I go, no, I won't, I'll be fine. And I go, always 2 months, 10 minutes later, I'm crying, I'm not going to do that again. Where am I? Yeah, so I was his kid sister, and I always looked up to him, and I just thought, so as his kid sister, who would follow him through the wilderness, scouring the Cobden Hills, checking for traps. Tones taught me how to skin possums, which I can't believe, by the way. Checking his traps. Tones, he taught me to drag a whitebait net, which I was never successful at. Raid the local orchards. Make fudge. Burn fudge. And hide our evidence from our parents by digging holes in the garden and putting the burnt pots in, which Dad would find later as he was digging over the garden. So for me being his little sister, I think it was really apt for me to step into his shoes, and I took over his paper run in Cobden. Not before he showed me the tricks of the trade. Be generous to the lovely old ladies, Trina. Be generous to the lovely old ladies. And the ones that weren't so nice, don't worry about it. And he used to say, you go and knock on the door. Chat up the old lady. Chat the lovely old lady, talk to them, collect the money, and I'll go around the back, and I'll go in the kitchen, and we only ever stole food. That was all it was. It was either apples, cake, whatever we could get. And we knew the places, we very knew the places that had the best. So, honestly, there were times in our life when we weren't close. Carrying on to that story, but we were never allowed in the same room at any time. He was an incredible tease, and he would just rile me to the max. And Mum used to say, Trina, you're up first. I'd have to get up, go to school. Tony, when Trina's at the door, Tony, you're next. We couldn't be in the same room. We couldn't actually wash it. My turn was to wash the dishes. He would come in later and dry the dishes because he would get me so livid. He'd wind me up. And as you know, Tony had significant scars. We know that. But I actually gave his first two. It was me. I'm not proud of it, but he used to get me so riled that I would just pick the nearest thing to me and throw it at him. One was a pair of scissors, and one was a knife. And I managed to, I was touching him the other day, and I said, these are the scars I gave you, I remember them. Anyway, so, yeah, we were three little rat bags, us three, and I don't know if my big brother's here, John. No. We would wait to John. John was a fisherman, and we would wait till he came home after he'd done, got rid of the fish off the boat and stuff. And John would then do as any West Coast fisherman would do. They'd go to the local boozer, and we would wait. In those days, you got your little pay packets in the little, brown paper envelopes, and we would wait. We'd sit there, wait till we heard him. We'd hear his jeans drop to the floor. We'd hear the change rattle on the ground, and when we heard the snore, we'd sneak in, and we would take it, got the money. So, anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I just want to say, there were times he got lost in those Cobden Hills, and we had to have the police out searching for him for 2 days with a mate. After his, and then after his accident, and after he trained as a nurse, then along comes our beautiful Christine White. I was 15 when I met Chrissy. And I remember she would come and turn up at Ward Street in a zippy red Mini, which I thought was pretty cool. Christine, Dad, Jack would often say, "You are the Saxon's angel." Chrissy, I know that you are so loved and so respected by us and our whānau. We adore you. We thank you. You even passed Daff, my mum's, and that's exceptional. Because she was going for 150%, and you got there, Chrissy. Most sister-in-laws were terrified of Mum. Anyway, probably were too, but yeah. Oh yeah, Chrissy, I just want to say you're exceptional, and you will continue to be exceptional. And from the bottom of our hearts and the Saxon family, we just say thank you. Thank you, thank you. You walk life with our tones, and you were the love of his life. I am so, so sorry that he couldn't shake or conquer his demons that have robbed you and your children and your grandchildren that are so rightfully yours. Christine and you and Tony blessed us with 3 exceptional humans and who have gone into vibrant, strong individuals who are passionate about life, creative to the max, and genuine people who have an impact of those around them. I'm nearly finished. And Vincent and Hans and Constance and this little wee precious wee peepee who's about to arrive. Thank you. Christine, you are their rock and they're yours. And I know you're going to hold each other. I know the time is right. And it's perfectly okay to go forward and enjoy your future because it's good and we want you to. My darlings, Jude, David, and Lydia, my heart aches for you and I'm so, so sorry. And if I could take this past week away, I would. I know there are significant people in this room today sitting here who love Tony and who walked with him at different times. I just want to say thank you for loving him and doing some of the hard yards. And when you couldn't, it was perfectly okay. In this pain and at this time, I just want to leave on a funny note about saying goodbye to the fun Tony Saxon, because he was really funny and I know there are many people in this room listening who would have had some bloody good fun times with him, and you've been lucky enough to be there. But Tony had the ability to laugh at the most ridiculous things, and it was infectious. And I've just got to tell you this one last story. We went down to a niece's wedding down in Gore, and we were living in Wellington. I was in Wellington, and it was just Tony and I, because I think maybe you were looking after the kids, Chrissy. Anyway, we flew down on the Friday, went to the wedding on the Saturday, flying out on Sunday night, and we'd got our tickets, and we got dropped off the airport by Kev, I think it was, and we get to the airport, 4 o'clock, to look at our tickets, 4:30. Right, good, get in there. We were on time. Tony was, as you know, never on time, but I had it covered. So we get there, and the guy behind the counter goes, "Where are you two off to?" And we said, "We're going to Wellington." He said, "No, you're not." And I said, "Yes, that ticket." He said, "Do you hear that noise there? That's the last plane out of here." And I said, but anyway, they had got it wrong. It wasn't our fault. So they gave us an option. We stay in Invercargill a night, or we get up to Dunedin before a 7:30 flight the evening. And Tony said he had a work appointment in the morning. He said, we'll take the flight in Dunedin. So we had to get up from, Invercargill to Dunedin 2 hours. And it was nearly 4:30. So the guy said, "You just two go out the front and we'll have a car there for you." We're standing there waiting. Tony's getting a bit agitated. Next minute, this humongous stretch limo pulls up. And Tony looks at me and I look at him and he goes, "Cobden kids from Saxon." Saxon kids from Cobden. So we spent the next 2 hours laughing and laughing. Him on one seat, me on the other. And it was just when cell phones came in, so he was ringing Mum, he was ringing everyone, guess where we are? And we got there, but in fact, I saw Tony 10 weeks ago, and I had a really beautiful time with him, and he said to me, we went back to that story. And it was a really precious story. So, there was, I'm just going to leave it at that. Yes, you can. I've said enough.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back in history to be fair why they were whitebaiting and possum hunting. I was probably in my bedroom reading a book because I was the reader. But some of my earliest memories Trina was probably really teeny, but I remember Tony saying to me, he wasn't at school, and he said, come with me quick, and we got Mum's wallet, and we went down to the local dairy, and I remember we were so little because we couldn't reach the counter, and we put $20 on that counter, and we said, lollies, please. A stupid man rang my mother, and she came and got us, and she wasn't happy, but I remember that. And another terrible, he was a ratbag. He really was a ratbag, and he often called my kids ratbags, so I'm going to call him that in return. But he, we used to get a packet of Herzl soap powder from Mum's, from the laundry, and we'd wrap it up, and then we'd tie a string around it and put it on the ground, and then we'd hide down the bank by this little river, and people would come and they'd go, oh, great, there's a parcel, and then we'd whisk it away. So they, we kind of ripped people off. That was fun. And one of my other memories of my childhood is kind of on the paper run, but not stealing. But we were kids from poverty, and we were kids that didn't have much at all. And I had this wonderful new jumper from the op shop, and I loved it. It was red. It had little bobbles on it. It's probably quite ugly now, but I was really proud of it. And I remember we were doing the paper run, and this girl came up and she said, oh, you've got a second-hand jumper. And I remember my brother turning around and saying, no, my mother just knitted it. And there he was, covering other people's shame. That's one of my biggest memories. He covered other people's shame. And my other big memory is, a lot of people today have talked about it when he came to Nelson. I can't help but feel a little bit responsible for that, because Ian and I at that stage were interim. No, actually, Ian was interim pastor of the church. I was home struggling with 2 new babies. And Tony and Chrissy and the boys moved, and Lydia was a baby too, moved to Nelson and changed my life, actually, because I was caught up in the midst of postnatal depression and life was pretty sucky. And Tony came and Chrissy came, and that was just a cool time. So, I have wonderful memories of those times. I think we found the house, did we not, in their lab. I think Ian was busy house hunting all the time. But it was really cool for me to have family around again and to, do parenting together. It was really cool. So thank you.
For the last part of the personal tributes, we have Tony's children, Jude and David and Lydia.
So it's been a challenging journey with Dad, with lots of ups and downs, but on Tuesday at his burial, I think as a family we've really processed some of the hard stuff, and today we just want to remember some of the good things and some of the good memories from Dad. And I think a lot of those memories come from the hunting and tramping trips we have. And one of those really fond memories I have is a tramp we did to Lake Daniel, and it was Mum, Dad, my good mate Daniel Milmine down there, and me. And it was not a hunting trip, it was a tramping trip. But my mate Dan and I were fizzing about it, and we came up with this plan that we really wanted to get a possum with homemade weapons. So Dan and I went down to the tip shop and we bought secateurs and kitchen knives, and we split them apart and we sharpened them on the angle grinder at home and made swords. And I think most parents, when they found out your kids were doing that, would be pretty, concerned. But Dad found out and he was all for it, and he was part of the plan. So, and I think when it came to time to go on the tramp, I think he even carried some of the weapons in for us. And so we tramped into the hut at Lake Daniel, and then waited till dark. And then Dad brought his spotlight because it wasn't a hunting trip, And at dark, it was go time, and Dad led the charge, and we went out into the bush, and 5 minutes later, there were found possums, and there was Dan and I throwing knives through the air at them, and Dad was there egging us on, and unsurprisingly, no possums even got close to getting hurt. But it did get worse from there, and we ended up in a river with eels and knives flying around, and same thing, Dad's there with the spotlight and egging us on, and it was just chaos. But those are some of the memories I have of both Dads, kind of that mischievous and childlike, fun and side he had, but also on those trips he was 100% present and 100% connected with us, and that was really, special times. And yeah, and another case with his kind of, rebellious, mischievous size was, I think we'd been visiting Jude in Sydney when he lived there, and we were walking around the CBD and checking out a few things, and we kind of ran out of things to do, and we were walking past the Sheraton Hotel, and there was a conference on there, and Dad says, "Here, I'll show you something." He's like, "Follow my lead." So we get up to the top floor of the Sheraton Hotel where the conference is on, and he's like, we're going to walk past the guy at the door, and you just need to act like you know where we're going. We're not going to say anything. And so we walked into this conference. I think it was a business, seminar. Walked in. No one at the door said anything. We sat down, had a little listen. No good. Went to the back, found the food. We had some food. We had some coffee. I think I've still got the pen from it. And we walked out and waved to the guy at the door on the way out. And then that's when Dad taught me the sport of what he called conference surfing. But yeah. So those are just some of the good memories I have, and I think for me, they summarise a small part of, the aspects of the personality that I really loved about Dad. Yeah, and it was a big, complex personality, so there was so much to it. Pass over to my brother, Jude.
Awesome. You've heard a lot today about Tony, or Dad, living life to the max, and there's probably no other way to describe it. It's probably max plus 10%. And so, same thing, I'd just love to share a couple of quick memories about that and the fun that we got up to. And probably one of the most significant memories I have is hunting with Dad. And we went into this place by chopper, because that's what he started loving doing. It was max, it was over the top. We didn't have to walk, we'd chopper in. But we choppered into this spot, and it was raining and miserable. And then there was this one tiny little break in the weather, but no hunting on the side of the river we were on. And he turns to me and said, "Jude, you're pretty good at crossing rivers. Should we just give it a go?" Sure enough, it was clear, so we crossed. Walked down a couple of clearings and managed to shoot 2 deer, and then it started bucketing with rain. We thought, we should probably get back up to the river crossing. Mission back up, and by then I think I saw a tree come down the river. And then we could hear boulders crashing in the river as well. I thought, oh no, what are we going to do? And being Dad and I, we just kind of left without anything and just a rifle. So we're stuck over the side of the river with a plastic bag and a muesli bar and our rifles. And so we'd put our plastic bags on against our skin and set up another plastic bag across a tree trunk that was lying down, and we're huddling in there and shivering away, just about can't open your mouth because you're so cold. And Dad turns to me and said, "Jude, if we want to stay warm, we have to spoon." I don't know how old I was, but it's just awkward spooning with your dad. And he was adamant he was going to be the big spoon, and I had no choice. So there we were, spooning, shivering away, trying to go to sleep. And next minute, we're asleep, and I wake up probably, 4 o'clock in the morning, absolutely still freezing, roll over, and there's Dad as blue as anything. I'm like, oh no, Dad's gone. And I thought, what's something that's really annoying that I hate? And I said, I hate being poked in the eyes. So I poked him in the eyes, and he grunted at me, and there we go. It was good. And we walked back across with our 2 deer. We had to walk about 2 hours up the river to find a crossing spot, and we got out with these 2 deer. But I can't think of a hunting trip that didn't go like that, or anything for that matter. And that's something that we cherish and we hold on to. Is Dad always had this idea that nothing was impossible. And if you couldn't do it or you didn't know enough information, you just jumped in and gave it a go, and hope for the best. And I think we all kind of live life a wee bit like that, a wee bit crazy. But it's just amazing what works out, what conferences you can get into, how many times you can get into the Kuru Lounge without a ticket. It's been great. So thank you all for being a part of the journey. But most of all, we just want to thank Dad today for all that you instilled in us, to love deeply, to care for one another, to live life to the max, and to value other people. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jude. I called my friend Tony Mr. Chaos. Whenever I was with Tony, it was pretty much like your hunting trips, Jude. It was good chaos, it was bad chaos, and occasionally it was ugly chaos. I've known Tony for nearly 3 decades and have travelled together with him to the Philippines, to Malaysia, to Slovenia, and it was always memorable chaos. It was fun, it was wild, there was the wonder of his incredible gifts. It was unbelievably stressful. I'm one of those people who likes to be early at aircraft gates, travelling with Tony. We came very quickly to an arrangement. We'd go our own ways when we got to the airport. He said to me one day, "Don, I've only missed 2 international flights." And I said, "It's 2 more than I planned to miss, Tony." One incident, though, encapsulates all of Tony's character: his impulsiveness, his generosity, his stress-inducing capacities. I told him one time, "Tony, it's a wonder you haven't got stomach ulcers." And he said, "I don't have stomach ulcers, Don." I said, "No, but you're a carrier." We were staying together in an apartment in Penang. My wife, Karen, and I, and Tony, we were ministering there. And he'd been completely hassling me about my old suitcase and saying, "Don, it's disgusting that you've got a suitcase like that travelling around the world." And I said, "Tony, it's a fine suitcase. It's been everywhere. I'm going to buy you a new suitcase, Don." "No, don't be stupid." Anyway, we were doing this seminar, a prophetic workshop together. It was kind of a show and tell. I was the tell part, he was the show part. And this particular day, I was up first, and then he was to come after an hour and take over. So I went off to the location. He decided he would use that hour to go and buy me a suitcase. So off he went. He went into a mall and went into a place that sold suitcases, picked one out, purchased it, and was heading out when the wheel fell off the suitcase. So he took it back and said, "This is defective. I want another one." So they gave him another suitcase, and as he wheeled that out, the wheel came off. He went back and said, "I want my money back." Now, if you try and get money back off a Chinese, Malaysians, best of luck. And they just said, "We're not giving you your money back. You can pick another suitcase." He said, "I don't want another suitcase. I want my money back." And they said, "Sorry, that's not going to happen. Pick a suitcase." So Tony, being Tony, went to the door, arms out, and stopped anybody who was potentially coming into the shop from coming in, saying, "Don't come in here. They sell defective goods." So this went on for about 20 minutes, apparently, and finally the people in the shop rang the owner of the shop and said, "Look, we're in real trouble." They tried to get security. Security wouldn't have anything to do with it. So the owner finally says, "Look, for goodness sake, give him his money back." On the way back, he finally got back to the apartment where he found that he'd locked himself out of his room. Meanwhile, I'm in the midst of this show and tell, the tell portion. The hour is up and there's no Tony. We're now in the show part and he's a no-show. So there's more telling. And I'm like this desperate man treading water, wondering when my partner is going to show up and take over. An hour and a half late, he comes in the door. I'm in desperation right now. He just stood straight up, picked this woman out and absolutely read her mail, told her things that had happened to her life 7 years earlier. She just burst into tears. People who knew her were crying. I was crying, but not for the same reasons. I think mine was a mixture of both relief and rage. But it was classic Tony. It was everything about the trips that we did together. And I tell that light a moment because we need a bit of light amidst the dark shadows that we find ourselves in as a result of Tony's self-inflicted death. Tony to me was like a Samson-like figure. He was incredibly gifted. His gift was second to none, but he was deeply flawed and deeply broken. And the sexual abuse that he endured as a child shattered the foundations of his personality. And in spite of his efforts, I don't think he ever really came to terms with the pain and the shame that it caused him. And the untended, unresolved wounds he carried shaped him profoundly. Ironically, it shaped him positively in the sense that he was unbelievably sensitive and so very kind to people, particularly marginalised people. Negatively, it shaped him in that hurt people always hurt people, especially those close to him. You know, relatively recently I was talking to him. He was in a really dark place, and he said to me, he spoke to me about the deep regret that he had caused his family. And he said, Don, I'm not going to do this, but if I ever took my life, it would be my way of saying sorry. It would be my way of trying to stop the pain that I seem unable to stop impacting my beloved family. I guess in the dizzying confusion and perhaps even the anger of a moment like this, there are questions that always come to mind. They're not often articulated, but they are always thought. And they go like this. If the gospel he professed was so real, how come it didn't help him? Who's to blame? Was it that he didn't have enough faith? Was it that his family wasn't supportive enough? His church wasn't supportive enough? His friends weren't supportive enough? We all seem to look for scapegoats and simple answers in moments like this, and they simply don't exist. What about his eternal destiny? And I know we don't have the time, and I suspect neither the inclination to endure a theological treatise on these questions, but could I, in closing, just offer you a few thoughts? I don't think Tony's choice undermines or contradicts the gospel. In many ways, it highlights and illustrates it. What other worldview story do you know that contains the elements that made up Tony's unique life? The fallenness, the dark forces, and yet the redemption and the purpose. The redemption that is now, but not yet here in its fullness, and we still grapple with our brokenness. That illustrates Tony's life. It isn't a contradiction of the gospel, it's an illustration of it. In a fallen world, even we who are redeemed, we work with personal brokenness. And we work with minds that can go awry in ways that can cause us to lose a grip and a grasp on the better part of ourselves and the power of the gospel. And in those moments, we're capable of doing terrible things. Though in those moments we may lose our grip on Jesus, he never loses his grip on us. And for that reason, I have absolutely no doubt that Tony's in God's merciful and gracious presence. Suicide, while it may be a sin, is not an unforgivable one. And the redemption that we have in Jesus is wider than, deeper than, and bigger than our capacity to make bad choices, including the bad choice to take one's own life. When it comes to the question of apportioning blame, can I suggest that we just simply leave that with God? That's way above our pay grade to try and sort out. And I'm sure that in a moment like this, and in the moments that have just gone by, we've all thought of things that we could have done, might have done, and should have done. But actually, I'm not sure that it would have made a significant difference in terms of the end outcome, given Tony's deep woundedness. I think I know Tony well enough to say that he would not want us to entertain that question. In the mix of his incredible giftedness, his brokenness, his peculiarities, and his idiosyncrasies, Tony loved Jesus passionately, and he sought in his better moments to share and show that love. His definition of prophecy is the best I've ever heard. He says, prophecy, Don, is God loving people with words. And Tony loved people. In his better moments, he was kind, he was generous, he was sensitive, he was funny. He was the hardest working ministry I've ever had at Gateway. And he would stay literally for hours until I'd drag him away. But he would stay to make sure that every single person was prayed for. My friend Tony has gone, before time and in a manner that I certainly wouldn't have chosen for him. But because he loved Jesus, and because I do too, my goodbye this morning isn't an eternal goodbye. It's just a temporary farewell. It's a, I'll see you in the morning, mate, farewell. And if you love Jesus, it's the same for you. I don't want to be unkind, but can I just say, for those of you here this morning, perhaps without a biblical faith, the poverty of that lack is never more apparent than when you stand at the graveside of somebody that you love. And I know Tony would be bitterly disappointed with me if I didn't encourage you to consider his Saviour. In spite of our personal fallenness, that Saviour's arms are open wide. Tony jumped into them, and he would encourage you to do the same. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you for your incredible kindness and love to us and to Tony. You're merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in covenant love and faithfulness to us. And we are so grateful that you have reached out to us in your Son, Jesus. We thank you for Tony's life. Thank you for your grace in it and your incredible touch on it. Thank you that though in his despair he lost his grip on you, you held him and hold him firm. We ask you to bless Chrissy, Jude and Megan and their family, David and Juliana, Lydia and Jackson. Please, would you comfort them? Would you bring them peace? And would you bring them healing? Because we ask it in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. Can I finish as we always do at Gateway? We finish our services with the benediction. And we invite people to lift their hands. You don't have to do that if you feel uncomfortable, but please receive this. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. And today may the love of God, the incredible grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the intimate friendship be with you now and until he comes. Amen. We're going to do a floral tribute now, and I'm going to invite you to stand row by row, to come forward, to take some flowers and to put them on the table here, and then to file out sideways, go out the back door, and we'll come round and meet in the cafe.
Should we do the When I Survey the Wondrous Cross before we do that? Yeah, if that's okay. Just before we flow on to the floral tribute, the family have chosen a very special song for us just to sing together, and so that's When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. And so would you just stand and let's sing this together and enjoy this version that Tony greatly enjoyed, and then we'll be led through into the next part after that. Thank you.
Great recovery, Jono. I'm sorry, I clean forgot that portion of it, but those things happen, don't they? Tony would be proud of me. We're going to invite you to come now, would you?